Hello, everyone. Welcome to what we realized is actually the kickoff of the third year of the Homesteading Academy webinars. We're excited to have our colleague Joanne Powell from Delaware Valley University here to speak on raising beef. Joanne, you can go ahead and take it away. Definitely tell us more about your background and look forward to hearing what you have to share today.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Kate and Bill, for having me today. I'm really excited to have the time to visit with you. I was sharing before I got started that I get a little long-winded when I'm talking about cattle because they are definitely my favorite species of ones I get the opportunity to work with. A little bit about me. I was raised on a dairy farm in Somerset County. It was a dairy right up until the time I went to Del Val as a student, and then we transitioned away from cattle and started raising Herefords, which we still have there today. The farm's been in my family since the 1700s. It's preserved, so hopefully we're going to have it set up for the next generation of boys that are going to take over in there, because I have a son who's a freshman at Del Val in environmental science and sustainable agriculture, and then both my nephews have one of them has beef cattle, one of them has sheep. So we have a lot of stuff going on over there still. Just some kind of quick stuff about me. I once I graduated from Del Val, I did go to work in animal health research at Merck. I was involved in a lot of anti-parasitic research. When they closed that facility, I started working at Rutgers as a farm supervisor, and I was actually in charge of their equine program when I started, and then they added cattle to that. And then after about 12 years or so, eliminated my position. And the day they told me they were letting me go, I found out about the opportunity with Delaware Valley. So it's kind of cool to be back home again, if you will. There I teach all over the place in terms of topics. Do a lot of dairy stuff, some livestock classes as well. And I'm their sole poultry science professor. So yeah, I'm all over the place. And this year they decided that I didn't have quite enough on my plate, so I was selected to be co-chair of the animal and dairy science department. So a lot of stuff going on, but a lot of fun. So topics for today, and like I said, it's going to be hard to kind of stay on topic, and because there's so much that is involved with this, right? So I kind of narrowed it down to these topics. How are you going to get started? We're going to talk a lot about facilities and equipment. Again, that's one of those things. If you are going to do this, it's important to do it correctly. And safety has to be a factor in handling cattle. They're large animals. They do not always respect us. So having the right facilities there really does make a difference. How do you pick the right breed? There's like 200 breeds of beef cattle. How do you pick one? Right. And I'll give you a little background on what I felt were probably the most popular breeds in this area. Also then probably the easiest for you to get involved with. Touching on reproduction, I don't know what people are thinking of doing, right? But there's just some kind of down and dirty basics for you if you are considering breeding cattle. If you're going the other route and you're going to finish them and have them processed either for sale or for your own use, some little bit of information on that, some marketing, and then hopefully, if I don't talk too much, we'll have some time here at the end for some questions. So I think it's important to really be honest with ourselves when we are getting involved really in any new enterprise on our properties, but cattle is a big thing. And I have friends that have been like, well, I was at an auction and there's this one cow and I really liked her, so kind of spur of the moment I bought a cow. And I'd have to say that that might not be your best game plan, right? Really, it's important to do your homework, um, really look into what is going to be involved, right? Because doing that can really end up saving you a lot of aggravation as time goes on, and certainly, the saves you the cattle running through your neighborhood, or any of those things, or even maybe neighbors' complaints, any of those things that could possibly potentially pop up. And I think it's really important that we're realistic when we're looking at that stuff, right? What can you personally handle? And I think it's, kind of human nature. Cattle are cool animals, and it's really easy to get attached to them. And so if your plan is to buy some steers and finish them, like, be honest with yourselves. Are you going to be able to do that after you've been taking care of those animals for, so long, and you've maybe developed a bit of an attachment to them? And the other piece is what can your property support? They need a lot of area. They don't do well in, being kept in small pens inside barns, right? They need space because, they end up 14, 16, 1,800 pounds, some of them. So, just be aware of that, and really think about what you can physically support on your property. All right. Important to check out your property, maybe township zoning, because every municipality is going to be a little bit different. So make sure you can even have them in the first place. Are your neighbors going to appreciate you having cows, or are they going to get ticked off when they're, out on their deck on a Sunday morning having coffee, and your cows are yelling because you haven't gotten out to feed them yet? And if for no other reason, right, you should be a good neighbor. But also, I think it's important, especially if you're going to be raising beef that you're going to have processed, maybe these are folks that would be buying product from you, right? So you really don't want to trash the neighborhood bridge too badly. How many animals can your property even support? And kind of rule of thumb, you need about an acre per cow, right? So keep that in mind as well. I'll talk about facilities. I'll talk about housing. Housing beef cattle is actually pretty simple. I'll spend a little bit more time about talking about handling facilities, and I want everybody to be really honest, and think about the safety of handling these large animals. Housing for them, it really depends on what you want to do. What your property has. Our mature cows, they do not come into a barn. We do not have a shed for them. They're perfectly content hanging out in the woods, right? Because they can get shade when they need it. They're protected from the worst of the weather. They can get in out of the wind. When we ask them to go in the barn, they know something's up, right? Something's changing in their little cow world. And I went, we were trying to load cows this morning and pushing them in the barn, and it turned into a really big undertaking. So the very bare minimum you need is a fenced area, secure fencing that's going to keep them where you want them to be, and some sort of shelter. Trees, ravines. The big thing they're going to want to really do is get in out of the wind. It's not uncommon to see a group of cattle standing out in a snowstorm eating, right? They have like 2 inches of snow on their back because they don't really care, right? So, but the wind is what's really going to bug them. A shed is great too, if they can, get into a shed. And certainly if you have existing barns on the property, that's fine too, right? Really anything will work as shelter. Minimum standards for New Jersey, just having some tree cover is actually acceptable as shelter. And I just, threw up a couple of examples here. This nice little shed. It's on skids. You could probably drag it around if need be. I would just say it probably should have some way of securing the animals inside if you need to have them inside for any reason, right? A gate or something, a couple gates in the front would be nice to have. You want to site it so it's kind of running east-west, open to the south, just to kind of take advantage of some natural ventilation. And then the picture with the two steers with the two goats, which, goats and cattle get along. Our Roth Center for Sustainable Agriculture over at Del Val, they have a multi-species rotational grazing system that they utilize, and it's dairy steers and goats, and the pastures are beautiful because the two species kind of eat opposite plants, right? One is eating the grass, the other one's coming behind and eating weeds up. So that's fine. But they're standing behind a solid wood fence, and it's pretty high. That's a windbreak, right? And they're perfectly content. Again, they can get out of that wind. Gates, when we are, and I apologize, a couple of these slides actually came out of lectures that I present for other classes, so it might be a little more information than you guys actually are interested in seeing. But really think about what you're going to do with your animals when you're putting gates in, and kind of where you're locating them along the fence lines. I like to have them in corners of pastures for cattle, because then you could utilize existing fence lines to kind of guide them on their in the direction you want them to go, and then towards that gate, right? Can't do that with horses, because we don't want them getting down in a corner and fighting with one another and getting hurt. But for livestock species, it works fine. If we put a gate in the center of a fence, right, as silly as it sounds, you're talking about a 10-foot, 12-foot opening, whatever it happens to be, they won't see it, right? So it ends up being really frustrating for you, and they end up running around a lot. So just kind of keep that kind of stuff in mind. Whatever gates you have, make sure that they are heavy duty. I've had bulls that, separated from the cows, and a bull's going to do what a bull wants to do. And jump the gate and flatten them. And so my dad, for a while, just to kind of, irritate me a little bit, had a collection of gates that were probably, I don't know, about 2 foot tall now, because the bull pancaked them on his way to get to the cows. So really heavily constructed. Make sure that you mount it correctly, which means, I like to see that top hinge pin pointing downward. Cows like to rub on things, and they'll come up and they'll rub on the gate. And if you have both the hinge pins pointing up, they'll rub hard enough that they'll actually lift the gate right off the hinge pins. So just be aware of things like that. Make sure your fences are visible, especially when you have like a smooth wire, high tensile fence, because especially when you're adding new cows to a facility, they might not see it. And if they come off the trailer a little hot, a little fired up from the ride, they could run right through them. So, make sure those fences are visible to new animals in particular. Just look, I see there's somebody in chat. Yeah, so Michelle, I'm going to get to that in just a few more slides with the differences in breeds. So just hang with me for just a couple of seconds. And here's just a couple of different types of gates. The gate all the way to the right, you'll see it has a mesh on the bottom, and that's a gate that works really well for different species and even small calves. You want to be aware, because different species are different sizes, right? So, you may have situations where animals can get through gates. So I personally really like those gates that are mesh on the bottom, but you can see those are all pretty heavy duty gates that will take a little bit of a beating, when we're working with our animals. Panels, fencing. So different, again, this is a slide for another class, but different types of animals need different types of fencing. Cattle are kind of cool, I guess, because they will work with a pretty wide variety of fences. I do recommend using some electric fence, especially if you are going to maybe have like a nice post and rail fence, or any kind of like I've seen cattle in those the PVC, the white PVC fencing. That's all well and good because it looks nice, right? But you really need to make sure that they're not up on that fence. Again, the rubbing thing, the trying to squeeze their gigantic heads underneath to get that grass that's always greener on the other side. Beef cattle really do have a healthy respect for electric fence, and it's a great tool, right? For one thing, if it's on a perimeter, it will keep them from pushing through a fence, but we can also use it in rotational grazing systems to kind of force those cattle into the areas where we want them to graze. I don't know if you guys have covered this in other courses, and with Bill involved, you probably already have, but they're really selective grazers, and they really only want the young shoots of grass, right? And so they'll overgraze one section of a paddock and leave the rest to get really rank and high and unpalatable. So the electric fence is a great little tool for us to we're only going to have them have access to a certain amount of that pasture, and they're going to make much more effective use of the grass that's in there. So great little tool. Like I said, they really do respect it. We have a lot of electric fence on our farm, and I used to laugh because we have these spring gates that are electrified. You just stretch across an opening. And we'd move, we'd open the gates to try to move the cows into the next paddock on the rotation, and they'd be looking at us going, oh, no, I know if I go and I stick my nose in there, I'm going to get a shock because there's an electric fence there. And they take a little bit of convincing, right, that electric fence is no longer there. So very, very healthy respect for it. Gate panels are great to have too. Livestock panels, if you need something temporary, like today we were using them to try to load cattle with, right? We can set up a nice little runway and control the flow of those animals. A couple of different types of fencing that's out there. And here are some panels. So a lot of the livestock type panels, they'll have pins that you can attach them maybe in a line. Some of them have chains. You can throw the chain around and hold them securely in place. The one piece I would make sure that you guys know is however you decide to use them, make sure you have them secure, because if you don't, if you're going to be like my dad and say, I'm just going to tie this up with a single piece of bail string and it's going to be good enough, that might not work out well, right? You really need to make sure that they are secure, and 1,200 pound steers pushing against them are not going to pop them open on you. Safety, I'll talk safety until I'm blue in the face, because I've kind of been there and done that. I've done a lot of stupid things, not thinking, and it's kind of interesting that I think that the folks that are working with livestock every day are a little more likely to get hurt, because we get sort of complacent, right? We're really comfortable working around our animals. We think we know everything that they're going to do, and that can really set us up for some injuries, right? And probably the worst injury I ever got was from one of my show animals, which was an animal that I worked with every single day. Had it, trained to walk on a halter, like everything. And she just one day kicked the living crap out of me. And I had surprised her doing something. And boy, did I get blasted, right? So they can be really unpredictable, and you have to just really keep that in mind. The other thing is it's important to understand their behavior. Different things will make them do really uncharacteristic behaviors, right? And it could be that the animal's sick. Hormones in females, in heifers, they become like a completely different animal. Maternal instincts in mama cows, and this is a kind of a good and bad situation, right? Because we want them to protect those calves from predators, right? But they kind of go to the extreme, and they'll see us coming up, and suddenly we're the predator, and so they can become very aggressive in their desire to protect that calf. And I had some friends of mine. I had to process a new calf, put ear tags in, whatnot. And they were like, you're going to need help. And I'm like, no, man, really, it's fine. Like, I can do this by myself. And long story short, like, I was perfectly okay. That cow was running circles around me and the calf, and I was ear tagging the calf and doing everything I needed to do. But those guys that came out to help me, they were running for their lives, right? Because they were going to get killed. And it was funny, but really drastic changes in behavior. So just keep that in mind. Also, vision, they don't see things the way we do. They're really funny when they're going from light into dark, right? Even puddles on the ground, they'll think that they're going to fall into a pit, right? And so we need to kind of anticipate that. I've seen cows where they wouldn't wet air, shaving. So some handling facilities, and I have this nightmare where we used to haul for a lot of area farmers, small farmers, and the folks would say, "Oh, they're really good. They follow me everywhere with a bucket of feed." And that was kind of that, this is not going to go well, because it usually meant that they did not have any way of really securing those animals. And guess what? Remember, I said their behavior is a little unpredictable. Well, when people they don't know show up and they're asking them to go on a trailer, that's a big concern for them, right? So suddenly, Muffy and Fluffy, who've been perfectly well-behaved animals through the entire time they've been on that property, become these, like rodeo bulls looking to kill somebody. So really durable facilities are important. And these are those handling facilities, right? Do they have to be really fancy? They do not. Some of the ones in the illustrations that I'm going to show you are kind of like the top level type handling, equipment that you need. But, you do need some manner of handling them, of controlling them. And it's for your safety as well as theirs, right? Because it's when they are, stressed out, is when they are likely to be injured as well. So we really have to take all of that into consideration. Need to lay those facilities out that's going to take advantage of some of their natural behaviors. If you have an area where they're going to be walking, if you make that curved, we can kind of fool them into thinking they're just walking in a big U and they're going back to where they started from. And meanwhile, we're moving them in the direction we want them to go, right? It's a little maybe above what we need to know for today, but it's easier to work with those behaviors than try to force different ones on the animals, right? Gates, chutes, headlocks, even ropes, right? Halters are valuable tools for you guys to have on hand for you to work with. This is a cattle chute, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen these. It has a head gate there in the front where we can actually catch that animal's head, hold that animal secure, great for if we have to give any kind of injections, any kind of treatments, deworming, put ear tags in, all of those things, because the animal's head is held in place. You could double that up with throwing a halter on the animal and kind of snubbing the animal's head, because they swing those big heads around. Again, they can become dangerous. Even if they're swinging their head at something as innocuous as a fly and they catch you with it, you're going to be seeing stars for like an hour, right? So really, really nice to have that. The sides, whether it's a all-in-one shoot like this is, or if you're making something with panels, holds that animal secure. They're not swinging around. They can't really kick at you. All of those things are taken off the table, and it becomes a lot safer for you as well as the animal. And a gate at the rear is nice. In particular, if you're going to be breeding cattle and maybe you need to get in there to inseminate a cow, or your vet needs to get in there to do preg checks, right? Great to have those. The main component of that handling system, and we need some other stuff to kind of get the cows there, right? So we're going to construct a narrow laneway along with some gates to kind of move that flow of cattle around. Way more than any of you guys are going to need. And actually, it's way more than I need as well. But I just really put this in here to kind of illustrate how it would all work together. The cattle are going to be held in a holding pen. We're going to open the gate into that crowding tub and use that gate to move those cattle in that curved direction and up into what we really would consider the working chute, that narrow laneway, and then all the way out into the head gate, right, where we can catch them and do things to it. Really, like I said, just to kind of show you the parts and pieces, but you could see that that's going to be really controlled, right? Those we're going to be able to push a set number of animals in there if we need, even if you just have one or two, right? You need to have something, because I don't know how many of you have ever tried to rope a cow and try to hang on. That's a challenge in of itself, right? So, if we can do something like this, it's going to work really much more to your advantage. At its simplest, man, it could literally be as simple as this, right? We got a gate in the corner. We have a couple of narrow sections of fence there. They're confined. They can't move around. Theoretically, they can't turn around and come back at you. I say theoretically because you will be just amazed at their athleticism, right? You would not think that things that are kind of big and chunky would be that flexible, but I can tell you from personal experience, in fact, just from this morning, they're pretty tricky. So in a place to restrain those cattle if you need to, right? Whether it's a chute, it's just the headlock will work too. And of course, you could incorporate other equipment in here, kind of get more involved. Ours has a scale in it, so we can just run the cows through and on the scale. And even just having a solid place to tie animals in a pinch will work as well. So good stuff to have. All right, transitioning here, choosing a breed. And there are over 200 breeds of beef cattle. Really, it's important to know what to expect from each. And I think, and I'm not trying to be biased or funny, I really and truly do believe that some breeds of cattle are a little more user-friendly than others. And there's some breeds that are kind of beginner breeds, and then there are some that are a little more advanced. So it's really important to know what to expect from each, right? Some animals work better in different parts of the country. Here in New Jersey, we're pretty suburban, urban area, right? Our farm is surrounded on three sides by housing developments. So, Brahmas are not going to fly for us, right? We really need to be aware of that. It also depends, I think, a little bit on what do you want to do, if you're just going to buy a few steers, maybe in the spring to run them on grass all summer and then sell them in the fall, maybe breed's not that important to you, right? If you are going to get into breeding cattle, maybe establishing a small cow-calf operation, you might want to think a little bit more about breeds. And really in our area too, some of that comes down to availability, right? And we have the breeds that I chose to include in here are really the ones that you will find the most of here in New Jersey. They are just like people. They have different personality, different behaviors. Some of them are a little more excitable than others. So especially if you're just getting in this for the first time, be honest with yourself about your limitations. And it's really important, know the source. It's good to develop a relationship with a breeder that you want to get involved in Simmental, right? So find a reputable breeder in your area. And most, they really want to develop those customer relations. Because if for no other reason, then it hopefully will lead to more sales, right? But the source, kind of their genetics, their feeding program, that the animals are healthy. All of those things are really important, right? Try to avoid those, going to a livestock market and seeing the little calf, little bottle calf, little whatever. It's really hard, I think, to look away from those, but in the long run, it might be in your best interest to do just that. So I'm starting off with a Hereford. This is what is really probably the most common breed here in New Jersey. We have a really big and active Hereford Association here. They can be horned, which is, I think, they're what people really think of as Herefords when you think about like the big herds of cattle that are on your Western movies, right? But there's a recessive gene in the Hereford cattle that produces polled genetics. Polled means naturally hornless. So horns look kind of neat, but cattle can do a lot of damage with them to each other, to facilities, to you. And so you have to maybe learn to manage those horns, whether you take them off, tip them. If you can get away with not having to do anything because they never grow them, that's okay too. So they're all in one breed organization, but there are horned Herefords and polled Herefords. So this, I think, these are like the gateway cows. They are very docile, sometimes a little too docile, where they're actually difficult to work with because they just don't care what you do them and they're not going to move. But they are really easy to work with. You can see I threw up that one little picture. That's a friend of mine's, actually one of my former 4-H'ers. That's his little girl Paisley, showing her heifer. And I think that's at the New Jersey State Fair. And, she was probably only 4 when that picture was taken. So they are really, really very easy to work with. They grow well on grass. They will grow well on in grain operations, kind of depending on the route you want to take. They're really good moms. The calves grow well. A lot of real maternal instincts in them. And they're really efficient, right? Good feed conversion. Feed conversion is how much feed they have to consume in order to put on a pound of gain. And they're super efficient cows. So that's the Hereford for you. Really, at least in my area, Somerset County, we have quite a few sizable herds of Herefords up in that area. Angus. They're always polled, easily recognizable, most popular breed in the U.S. They have a recessive trait where you can occasionally get a red calf. So they actually have a separate breed organization for those. really widely known as a carcass breed. I'm sure all of you have been to the grocery store and seen certified Angus beef. There's also a certified Hereford beef program. They were a little later in getting that established, but it's starting to gain some momentum. I'm really excited. There's a local bar here in my neighborhood that sells certified Hereford steaks. But certainly the Angus folks have really done a great job in marketing that product, really good quality products that are out there. So they've kind of gotten a reputation as being a little high strung. The Hereford Association kind of noticed that they were getting a little bit of a bad rap for that. And so one of the things that breeders can now select for is docility, right? How calm is that animal? And they actually go in and they rate the cows, and they figured out, if they use bulls that have high docility scores, over time, the cows calm down. And they've really made a lot of big strides. I feel my dad will still tell you they're all nuts, but they are good cows. Here's another reason why it's important to know your source, to go with a reputable breeder, because that's something you should definitely ask about, right? Is how do you select for docility and things like that, right? And they should be able to tell you. They grow really well. Again, good moms, real milky, what we call milky cows, right? They produce a lot of milk for those calves to grow on. So you'll see a lot of big herds of Angus in New Jersey as well. Simmental, they may be considered a dual purpose breed, which means we're going to get meat as well as milk. Brown Swiss dairy cows, if you're familiar with them, they actually got their origin in Simmentals. So they are some really milky cows. Probably one of the best cows I ever saw was a Simmental cow. I was at a farm over in Hillsboro. She raised twin bull calves. And each one of those bull calves weighed over 800 pounds when they weaned him at 6 months of age. So that is unbelievable, because our kind of go-to with cattle is we want them to wean about half of their body weight in calf a year, which for a 1,200-pound cow, that's 600 pounds a calf, and that little probably 1,400-pound cow weaned 1,600 pounds of calf. So it's unbelievable, but they really are heavy milking cows. Calves grow really quickly. They're like the rainbow cattle, because they come in a really wide array of colors. They can be solid black, solid red. There's different strains of them that are a tan and white color. So they're kind of all over the place in terms of color. Large frame. When I say an animal is large framed, that means they're tall. And there's that framework gives them that much more area to put meat and muscle on, right? The muscle is actually the meat. That's what we're going to consume. So those bigger cattle will have that much more area for meat. So really high carcass yields, relatively easy to work with. It's like anything, it's a matter of getting them used to you. But I personally like them. They're probably my second favorite behind the Hereford. Belted Galloways. So these are your Oreo cows, right? They can be red and white. They can be, I've seen them kind of like a grayish, a funky color. And white, but I when I think Belted Galloway, it's that black and white Oreo looking cow. They're really hardy animals, right? They have a double hair coat, so they can be out in all kind of extremes of temperature, a little more sensitive to heat. Really good grass conversion. You could just turn them out on pasture and they're going to grow and gain and do all the things we want them to. interesting note about them is they are a little slower maturing. So typically, if we're raising steers, our gold standard, if you will, is we want them to be ready to go to market at about 18 months of age. These guys are well over 2 years old by the time they're ready to go. They just grow at a much slower rate. Cows, typical beef breeds, they're going to have their first calf at 2, which means we're breeding them at 13, 14 months of age in there somewhere. These guys, we can't even start breeding them until they're over 2, just because they grow that much more slowly. And so if we breed them too soon, they're a little more likely to have some problems calving because they're not done growing themselves, right? So you need to be aware of that. So I have a very dear friend of mine I met back in when I was in college. She's manager of a place around the corner from me that they have a Hereford, a big Hereford herd, and they have a big Belty herd. And she refers to them as quirky because they would be your advanced, I think, your AP cows, right? You really do need to know what you're doing with them, and kind of expect the unexpected. When I was at Rutgers, I brought my livestock evaluation class over there to do a little judging, and my class of 30 kids or whatever came walking up, and she had a group of heifers in a pen for them to judge, and the one heifer took one look at the kids, and she just, well, we refer to it as free willying, right? But she jumped right over the fence and was gone. And I was like, oh, I guess that one's 4th place, right? But they can be really excitable. So just again, be aware of that. Wagyu, I don't know if people have heard, you guys have heard this yet or not. This is like the latest, greatest fad, I guess, in the beef industry. It refers to it literally translates to Japanese cow, right? And so it refers to any of 4 Japanese breeds. We're seeing more and more of them, and really, I think where we're seeing the most use of them are in crossbreeding programs, and in particular, we're seeing a lot of use of them in the dairy industry, where they're actually crossing the Wagyu on maybe some lower genetic quality cows to increase the value of bull calves. So why Wagyu? Their meat's a little different than our conventional beef breeds. A lot more marbling. Marbling is the intramuscular fat. It's the little squiggles of white that you'll see in your steak. What's good about marbling is, when we cook that product, all that fat kind of melts and permeates throughout the muscle, and really gives beef that wonderful flavor, contributes to tenderness, contributes to juiciness. So beef that has a lot of marbling is going to be a lot higher quality, right? So if you're having a carcass graded by USDA, that's going to be like your prime meat, is the stuff that has the marbling in it. So we're seeing the use of Wagyu starting to really kind of take over a bit, and really bump up a lot of the quality grades in our conventional beef breeds. Place over here in Hillsboro, they're an Angus farm. They started using Wagyu, decided they really liked them, and they're transitioning away from Angus, and they're going to go 100% Wagyu. So that's something you're probably going to be seeing more and more of. Crossbreds, there's nothing wrong with that, right? I'm just kind of throwing them in there. If you just want, some cattle to have on your property to manage the grass, or to raise for beef, whatever, they're great cattle. They're actually really great cattle because they perform so well, and they perform well because of something that's called hybrid vigor. When we cross two breeds, they're going to outperform the purebreds of either of the originating breeds. Great milkers. If you're breeding them, they'll grow like crazy. They'll finish sooner. All of the good things that we really want to get out of our cattle can literally be anything, right? In that one of those early slide sets, you saw a group of my 4-Hers standing there, and there's two little dinky calves, two girls holding two little dinky calves. Those are Holstein Wagyu crosses, right? They look a lot different than the purebred beef breeds, right? But they're still growing, they're still doing, right? So literally anything can be crossed. Performance is going to vary, right, based on that cross. Those little Wagyu dairy crosses are never going to be, great big thick butted beef steers, right? But they're certainly going to serve their purpose, whatever it is. One's a steer, one's a heifer, so I really don't know what their purpose is, but they're going to do well. You'll see some crosses that are going to vary a little bit by region as well, because in the Southeast in particular, it's always, it's hot and humid. Our Simmentals, our Herefords, our Angus, they're not going to do well in that environment. But Brahma cattle, they're programmed to handle hot, humid conditions. So you'll see a lot of them down there, or you'll see a lot of what we call Brahma influenced cattle down there, right? Because when we cross an Angus with a Brahma, we've created an animal that is still going to grow like the Angus, but it's going to have that Brahma genetics in it that's going to help it to be able to handle hot, humid Florida conditions, just as an example. So we do see some variability in our crosses, based on location. All right. That's all I'm going to say about breeds, because, like I said, there are so many of them. So if you're going to try to breed cattle, we got a question. Does cross? No, it really does not. They are a little more resistant to disease. Some of them are a little more resistant even to parasites. It's actually kind of interesting. They just are like tougher all around. In terms of marketing, it would depend. If you're just raising cattle to finish and sell the meat, then probably not. What's kind of cool is in the certified Hereford beef program, as well as certified Angus beef. So long as, if you had a Simmental crossed with a Hereford, so long as it displayed some Hereford characteristics, and met all of the criteria for this CHB program, they'd still be eligible for that marketing plan, right? So, but meat quality, it's going to be fine, maybe even a little better than the straight breds. So good question. I think it's funny, my plant person's asking all the cow questions. So if you are breeding, like I said, they should have their first calf at 2 years old. And we want them to have a calf every year. The bull's going to be the easiest in terms of getting cows bred. However, they can be aggressive. They're not as, generally speaking, they're not as aggressive as dairy bulls because their personalities are different. But you still have to be aware of them, how fast they are, how tough they are. If you're not breeding cows, they need to be housed separately. The beef industry as a whole, we tend to want to group our calves. So we'll have cows that calve in the spring. We'll have cows that calve in the fall. Depends a bit on where you are, on feed availability, things like that. So unlike the dairy industry where we want to ensure a constant milk supply, so we have calves year round, With beef, we really do try to group them by season. So you need separate housing for them. Also, there's a lot of costs kind of associated. You're going to need to feed them. You're going to need to, do all vaccines and all of the things to make sure he stays healthy. So it can be a little bit of an added expense. There's a lot of farms that will lease bulls or rent bulls, and you'll run them maybe for 6 weeks or whatever with your cattle, and then return them. So that's a nice viable option for a lot of places as well. Artificial insemination, provided you have the facilities to breed cattle, a nice option as well. You can take a course and learn how to artificially inseminate cows. It's like a 3-day short course, usually put on by breeding cooperatives, or maybe your vet can breed for you, or you can hire someone to breed cattle for you. But then you don't have to worry about managing a bull. So just a couple of options out there. Losing the ability to calving. They need to calve in a clean, dry area. Outside is perfectly acceptable, provided the weather conditions are okay. Honestly, it's in some ways it's probably better to have them calve, on a nice sunny day. It's nice and dry out there. It's important to know, recognize when they're getting ready to calve, know when you need to help. It's really important to have a great relationship with your vet. Calving, I think it depends on your operation and your cattle. It's like anything. There's inherent risks, right? We went, probably 25 years and never had a cow that had a prolapse, right? And then boom, we had one. Why? No one could figure out. And prolapse means she pushed out her entire reproductive tract, and we ended up losing the cow. You want to look for things like a abnormal presentation, right? Normal calving, the calf comes out kind of like a diver, right? We want to see front feet with the soles pointing down, coming out the cow. In a mature cow, probably about a half an hour after you start to see the signs that she's in labor. Heifers are going to take a little longer because they're a little dingy, right? They don't quite know what's going on, so they tend to be, super reactive to everything. So you need to give them a little bit more time. And then it's just a matter of watching progression. You're going to see the front feet, and then we want to see the head coming out next, with, kind of nestled in between those front legs, and then ideally everything's going to kind of slide out. And usually once you get the shoulders out, everything else kind of follows. If you see a cow that's really struggling, and a lot of times it's like they're up, they're down. The worst thing that can happen is they quit, right? And that's something, and I'm going to end up going way over, but that's something that we're going to see with cows that are really fat, right? Is they just run out of energy because they're out of shape. So things like that you really need to watch out for. If you see back feet, right, and that's why I mentioned about the soles pointing down. If you have feet coming out but the soles of the hooves are pointing upwards, that's a breech. That's a veterinary emergency right there. And you could either try to push that all the way back in and reposition a calf, that's a lot. Or you just grab on and you pull, right, and just get it out as soon as possible. So there's a lot to it. You want to have that calf up and nursing within an hour. Dip the navel in iodine. Do not spray it, right? That umbilical stump is basically a tube up into the calf, and so if you spray it, you're only getting the outside, right? We have to worry about the inside of that umbilicus as well. So when we dip it, we're going to put that iodine, it's going to get up into the calf a little bit, and that's going to prevent any kind of pathogens from getting into the calf, because they get in there and they kind of take up residence, and they can really cause a lot of ailments later on. So we want to really be careful with that. They need to get colostrum, that first milk, out of the cow as soon as possible after born. They can only get, so they're born without an immune system, and they can only get the immunoglobulins in and absorbed for a really short period of time. They're already starting to lose some of that ability by about 6 hours old. So 24 hours after, the gut's completely closed, and it wouldn't matter how much colostrum you gave that calf, it's not going to do it any good. So we really want to get it into the calf as quickly as possible.
Joanne, I wanted to make sure we answer Diane's question before we
so I thought I'm sorry, if you want to jump in and ask again, because I know you'd asked about, kind of comparing it to sheep and goats. It's the same thing. There's risks involved with anything like that.
Yes. So maybe as a beginner, you might start with buying weaned calves.
So it would probably be easier to start with weaned calves and raise them up. I think it's a little bit on how comfortable you feel. If you've had previous experience with sheep and goats, the cow's not going to be as big a deal calving one out, because really they're not that different, right? Yeah, like you could have cows like for forever and never have to help, right? Or you could have a year where every other cow that calves you have to pull. It's really hard to say. If with like my 4-H kids that want to get into breeding, I have them get calves and raise them to the point where they're ready to breed them, and then that's when that good vet relationship is important. Reaching out to other mentors within the livestock industry, whether it's the person you got those animals from in the first place. All of those relationships are really important. That's one thing that's kind of cool about the livestock industry, is my experience has always been people want to be pretty helpful. Right. So if you were to come to me and say, I have a cow that's calving for the first time, what should I do? Make sure you have equipment available on hand, even if it's just like towels and your, chains if you need them, right? They sell OB chains where you can actually attach to the legs and kind of pull. And I think maybe that middle picture of that red calf, he has something on those legs that he's helping to pull the calf out with. But again, I tell my students, like, maybe the most valuable tool you're going to have is your vet's phone number on speed dial, right? So I don't know. Did I cover it?
I think so. It would be great if we could try to wrap up in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
I will do what I can.
Okay.
All righty. Yeah. And remember, like I said, those beef cattle are pretty protective, right? Sometimes they'll hide a calf and you'll walk by it 20 times and not see it. That's Mother Nature, right? Protecting that calf, and they can become aggressive. You can, this is just beef cattle, different from dairy. Mother cows are going to keep those calves anywhere from 6 to 10 months, depending on the operation. Generally, it's around 7. And then those calves can either, kind of be held and fed like some feed that's going to basically make them increase in size. Maybe they're just going to get turned out on grass, depending on how you want to finish them. Or they're going to go into like an actual feedlot situation where we're giving them some higher energy feeds to really help them grow and develop to market weight. Time depends on the type of finishing, like what are you going to provide them with in terms of nutrition is going to determine how well and how quickly they finish. Usually our conventional meat that we're going to find in the grocery store is coming from, steers or heifers, right? You can need a heifer about 18 months of age, maybe a little older.
Guess, Joanne, it might be a good time to maybe wrap it with just anybody has questions for you. And I wanted to make a comment. I appreciate you talking about the safety a lot. My experience, a lot of people sometimes don't know what they're getting into when they're first starting out. And I think that was really important. And I also tend to agree with your father about the Angus. Anytime I've had problems, it's been with Angus.
They just, I don't know. And I do think they have changed a good bit. They are a lot more, because I think as a whole, they got that reputation that my dad gave them, whether it was well earned or not. But they can be a handful.
Did we have any more questions, Kate, on the chat?
There was another question from Diane about processing. In New Jersey, it's very difficult to get processing dates, given the low number of processing facilities. So they were wondering if it makes sense to have some kind of custom, it sounds like your own facility for processing.
So processing is really one of the most complicated parts of the whole scenario right now, right? It depends a little bit on how you're planning on marketing that product. Most of my friends and colleagues who are marketing beef to retail, like at a market, whether it's their own or a farmer's market, they're hauling cattle out to Pennsylvania, and some of them pretty far out in Pennsylvania. If you are going to go the route where you are just going to sell maybe a quarter or half, right? Market your animals that way. There are a few more options here. They're called custom exempted butchers. And in that situation, the animal is actually sold before it's processed. So, if Bill raised a steer and I'm going to buy half of that steer, I'm going to buy that half before this, while the steer is still walking around, essentially. And, that does open up a few more opportunities. I would then pay Bill based on what's called the hanging weight of that steer, which is the weight immediately following slaughter. And that meat, when it comes, that butcher's going to cut it the way I want it cut, right? If I, want all steaks or, whatever. But each one of those packages of meat by law needs to be labeled with, not for resale. Right. So I can't then take the meat I just bought from Bill and try to sell it to Kate. Right. So, that's a big piece. And again, it depends on what you want to do. Maybe that's going to be good enough for you. If you're raising a few, maybe you're going to, raise two because they do better with a buddy. You really only need one for yourself and maybe look to those neighbors to buy. Right. So that is an option. But really, I think the Rutgers, the farm at Rutgers, they have the steers killed they did have the steers killed at one spot, and then we're taking to a second spot to get cut. That's that's the kind of like the hoop you have to jump through in order to retail that product. Most farms, like I said, are hauling out. I think the Springfield is like Bucks County area, and I think there's some others in eastern PA, but it's quite an undertaking.
Joanne, any suggestions for somebody who's considering this, where to get into, like for mentoring or associations or anything like that?
So the Hereford Association in New Jersey is a good one. There's also New Jersey has a beef industry council, so you could perhaps get involved with that organization as well. And it's funny, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a 4-H leader. Boy, those little 4-Hers, man, they know their stuff. So even like asking questions at fairs and things, talk to 4-Hers, talk to other breeders that are, maybe they have cattle that they're showing. But those are really some good ways to start to kind of soak in that information.
I appreciate that, because that's sometimes you don't know where to go.
Yeah, and it can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Don't go on Facebook. Don't ask those people, because my son has meat goats, and so every now and again I'll just go into a meat goat group, and I just look at the recommendations and shake my head, and I'm like, nope, that's just never gonna work.
Yeah, be cautious with Dr. Google.
Very, very. It's a good starting spot, right? At least to give you a little bit of background, but don't use it as your Bible, as it were.
Well, thank you, Joanne. Everyone on here, you'll be notified when the recording is available. And I'm also going to send out a survey about the webinar, looking for future topic ideas and your feedback on the presentation. We hope to see you back in November. Details about that coming soon. And just want to thank you all for being here.
Joanne. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.